for two. Kickers are extra, I give them the boot. Ooh, going for two. Sit back, relax while I grab me a brew. Ooh, now I'm reclining while putting my time and I'm ready to go. My spine is aligning and much my lineups, my bank account grow. I am so rich, but knowledge is all that I'm leaving it with. Ooh, listen to this, multiple options, how far can I get? Ooh, DFS Dynasty redraft tonight, I'm not finishing last. I'm finishing past any and all, I am looking to last. What else? This spot is popping and I am so locked in and only opening the door when it is opportunity knocking. And all of these spots keep on talking and talking. So what are we talking? What kind of alignment? And running it deep, even players forgotten or came from the bottom or hitting that top. And this spot is popping, yeah, this spot is popping. And woo! This is the arm champ, yeah. Put up your arms, yeah. Sound the alarm, yeah, yeah, yeah. Woo!
What is going on, and welcome to the RSO 2024 Dynasty Personal League Podcast. I'm your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. You follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. We are here tonight to break down this Dynasty Auction Contract League. It's on the RSO platform. And joining me tonight are two familiar faces. They've been on a lot of these lately. First up, we got Mr. Kyle Senra. Of course, he's a writer and ranker at GoingFor2.com. Host a slew of podcasts, including the Sunday morning show. Pretty soon here, it's going to be kicking off here in about a week. Also host of the Monday night pregame show as well. The 2-point conversion, the press coverage podcast, you name it. Kyle's probably done it. What's up, Kyle?
RSO PLP. Two of my favorite 3-letter combinations. And yeah, combine them together. And this is a heck of a time. We got a great trio here tonight, too. Love we just did a RSO PLP last week with the same trio, so happy to be back, guys.
Yep, good stuff. Also joining us tonight, Mr. Brian Ford. Of course, he is the host of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 show right here on GoingFor2 Live. He's also the host of Dynasty Fever podcast. Follow him on Twitter at FFJunkie_. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how we doing? I was running through my head the 3-letter combos that I like, and all of them were kind of inappropriate for the show. Yeah. But yeah, love it. I always love these PLPs. They're a lot of fun, and I really like when there's folks in the chat too.
Yeah. Yep, already joining us. We got Todd and Trenton already in the chat. I know Trenton is, I believe, the commissioner of this league. Was actually in the league that we did last week as well as just a manager, but in this one he's actually the commissioner. And then Todd, I guess, is the reigning undefeated champ checking in, apparently. And Nicholas is also in the chat as well. So welcome, gentlemen. For those that are listening that are wondering what the hell is a PLP, Personal League Podcast, it's a 1-hour show dedicated to their league. But it could be dedicated to your league as well if you go to goingfor2.com/PLP. Now, unfortunately, we have sold out for this year, but you can purchase one for next year. We do Dynasty, we do Redraft. We've done Vampire Leagues. We've done 20-team Monster Leagues. We've done pretty much everything. So go to goingfor2.com/PLP and use the promo code 25 for 25, and you can save 25% on a PLP for next year. The way it works is I gave these gentlemen the rosters of this league. They ranked them from 12 to 1, with 12 being the team they would least want to take over and 1 being the team they would most want to take over. And I will say it at the top here, me and Brian are not the experts of contract leagues. That's why we brought Kyle in. As you can see, Kyle down there, he is the expert. He plays in a lot of RSO leagues. So me and Brian kind of rank these teams as if it's a regular Dynasty league. Kyle will chime in with his thoughts on the contract side of things as we go through these teams. Once we rank the teams, we'll count them down tonight from 12 to 1. And then I've assigned each one of these guys a couple teams each to talk about, to be the expert of, break it down, strengths, weaknesses. And, of course, Kyle will chime in with the contract stuff. All right, let's go ahead and jump into team number 12.
Number 12.
Number 12 team kind of threw me off a little bit because I pulled the rosters up and they changed their name. But on the sheet that we originally had, it is Bobby Trees. And Brian, this is your team here.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a shout out to Robert Woods or some other meaning of trees that might have something to do with some of the 3-letter combos I like. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, so this team not in very good shape. I think all of us ranked it fairly low. after Love and Dak, we have Russ as a quarterback 3. It's passable, but not something that I would love. Running backs are mainly just kind of meh. And also, I would say there's too few of them. One thing that you'll hear me say a couple times tonight is this ratio of, I keep saying 6-4, and really mathematically it's 3-2. I don't know why I complicate it, but like 3 running backs for every 2 wide receivers. And so like if I try to get toward that golden ratio. And Kyren carries some risk as your RB1, but okay, fine. We can definitely roll with that. But yeah, Zamir is dead zone. He's next year's Madison. And oh, look, you have Madison. And you don't handcuff your own running backs. Not a great strategy in my humble opinion. And I think Moss is kind of like the definition of meh projected volume. Your wide receivers are solid overall, but there is some age. And again, with that ratio, there's too many. Lamb, Pittman, Cup, Amari Cooper, D-Hop, and then sort of another tier of Tillman, Hyatt, Pearsall, and Luke McCaffrey, who may get a little bit of a bump now that we have Dotson gone. Kind of TBD what's going on with that offense. But, obviously Lamb elite, new extension. I think, Pittman is divisive as far as like how much of an alpha, wide receiver 1 he really is. And otherwise, again, you have good receivers, but you've got some age on there. Tight ends are pretty good. There's upside in the tight end group for sure. Pitts is my tight end 1, so obviously, love that. And Chig and Sanders, are fine for a league like this. You got some young upside there. Problem is, you also have like small cap space and no second round pick. And I just look at this and I just see a lot of mid, right? And that's kind of the word that comes to mind. So I would move off some of these older pieces, add some young upside running backs. And of course, like a lot of these teams that I tend to not like taking over, I would try to add some cap space and some draft picks.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I do like his receiving core. You mentioned CeeDee Lamb, who just got his big contract today. Michael Pittman is there. Some decent young players on the bench like Ricky Pearsall. And I guess that's pretty much it on the bench as far as young guys. You got D-Hop. Cedric Tillman, I don't even know if he's worth rostering at this point. Kyle, you had this team ranked 1 spot higher than me and Brian. Me and Brian had this team ranked dead last. You had them 1 spot higher. Is there anything that we're missing here as far as contract stuff goes, or do you just like this team overall?
I mean, I ranked them 11th. I don't really like that team that much. But because one of the things that I think I easily identified with these bottom 2 teams was, man, 2 of the worst contracts in the league and just things I wanted to avoid. Brian already talked about the risk of having Kyren as the RB1, having him on a 3-year deal where, or 3 years left on the contract. Yeah, I think it was signed this year just in the auction where, by 2027 or 2026, you're paying over $30 million, well over 31, 32 million, 33, whatever it'll be. That's a lot of risk on cap there when I still think Kyren will be the lead back for the Rams going forward. But if I'm surprised Jamie's not in the chat tonight. I was kind of hoping he'd join in and say, if Jamie has his way, Corum's replacing Kyren this year. I know, Brian, you tend to also maybe lean on that side that Kyren's not long for that job. So certainly having him on a 3-year contract poses a lot of risk. There's really only one other contract that I would say is worse. At least with Kyren, you can say, okay, he's going to get solid production this year if you believe he's still the starter. Cooper and Associates money, yeah. And that's one of the strategies is the Kyren contract, but also the fact of the 1-year rental players next year. So you've got them, it's players with 2 years left on their contract. Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, and then Kyle Pitts. Now, having all 3 of them next year, fairly decent cap hits, that's going to prevent the CeeDee Lamb contract. So, Jeff, you talk about how CeeDee Lamb's just got paid because that, in this contract, he would be normally playing on his 5th-year option. He wants to get that money now and then get that big extension. So currently with the contract, Bobby Trees has CeeDee Lamb on the 5th-year option. But what I've noticed with this league is there's no franchise tag and there's no extension. So unlike the RSO league we did last week, and frankly most RSO leagues, there's different ways to keep players. Typically those 3: franchise tag, contract extensions, and 5th-year options. They've eliminated 2 of those, which to this league says it puts much more emphasis on the auction. They're going to want to have as many good players in the auction every year as possible, what that ensues is, yes, CeeDee Lamb is on this team for this year, but then next year he's a free agent, so he's going to be in the auction, so anyone can bid on him. Which, considering CeeDee Lamb, I expect that'll be a massive contract. This team barely has any cap space this year. You know, a tenth of a million. That's not even enough to pick up one minimum player. Now, in theory, you could drop a minimum player to pick up a minimum player, because the $500,000 contracts, those, when you cut them, there's no guarantees. Nothing counts against it. So if you don't have any cap space, in theory, you can always just replace one minimum contract with another, but you can't do anything else. I actually don't think this team has any minimum contract, so they can't do that. So but what complicates it is next year, Kyle Pitts, this is his rookie, the last year of his rookie deal technically, but I noticed the way the contract works, they've picked up Pitts' fifth-year option. So his salary is going to jump pretty drastically. Like CeeDee Lamb's fifth-year option this year is $24.2 million. That's the average for the wide receivers. Tight ends, I imagine, is lower than that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Trenton says it best. No franchise tag players or extensions. They want as many players in the auction as possible. That's kind of, you know, and I noticed that, I think, last year, where, okay, yeah, all I see outside of what would look like, okay, these are the contracts signed, was the fifth-year options at the end of rookie deals. So that's actually something I'm going to talk about throughout when those players come up. I'm going to actually ask Brian and Jeff, like, okay, would you consider picking up fifth-year options next year? Because it's already been done for this year. So that's a decision that has to be made. I believe it's 3 days before the auction. That's when the off season ends, and like the New Year League starts is 3 days before the auction. So they have basically whenever the auction is. And if I wonder if just on some of the players that were taken in contracts, I'd imagine this is an auction that takes place like in August, as opposed to maybe some, like I typically do like for new, like not startups, but like the oldest league I'm in, we usually do our auction in like June. So like, you know, we do rookie draft in May, and then a month later the auction. It seems like they wait late. So you'll have information, but still, before we enter this year, that like this is the last season of true data we'll have to know for those fifth-year option players. But anyway, all to say, next year it's going to be super tough to keep CeeDee Lamb. So that's probably the best piece of this team. And I mean, Superflex, I actually really like the quarterbacks, Dak and Jordan Love. And so to answer the long way around to answer your question, Jeff, 2 reasons I didn't rank this team last was, as much as I don't like the Kyron contract, there's another contract I like even less. And I like this quarterback situation overall. Dak on a 3-year contract, not so expensive considering what other quarterbacks are making. And then Jordan Love on the 2 years. You know, it's funny. Last thing I'll say before we end here is Brian mentioning Russell Wilson is passable for a quarterback 3, which is a great pun. So kudos to you, Brian. But again, just 2 factors that make me raise.
I wasn't even trying.
Natural talent, I suppose, then. But yeah, I raised them 1 spot, but not much more. They're again my team 11.
Fair enough. Let's go ahead and get into our team number 11.
Number 11.
Number 11 team, ranked as high as 11, as low as 12. It is the team that Kyle ranked 12th. It is Catalina Wine Mixer. And Kyle, this is your squad here.
Sorry, I'm supposed to give advice. Basically, the thing I was going to say to that last team, by the way, was Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Kyle Pitts. The reason I mentioned them is big. Like, okay, you have them on contract this year, then next year they're basically rental players. I wonder if before the auction next year you try and sell one of them or maybe 2 of them, and that's how you free up the cap space to potentially win CeeDee Lamb back. It's funny, you guys ranked that team last, probably not even knowing that Lamb was on you don't even get him long term. He's just on the last year of the contract, and he has to go as an auction. So knowing that information, I'm sure you'd say it's definitely number 12 then.
Yes, yeah, 100%. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb was one of the reasons why I had him 1 spot higher than the team we're talking about now.
So when going through and writing down the teams, Catalina Wine Mixer ended up being one of the first teams I went through the contracts just to gauge all the information, put it all next to each other more easily than it was on the spreadsheet. And I saw that contract, Darren Waller, like a 4-year. What was it? I think it averaged $27 million per year, and there's still 3 years left on that contract. So it was signed last offseason. It looks awful now. Honestly, I probably would have. Like, it's too late to do it now because, I mean, you could still do it now, but it won't impact as much as you probably should have thrown, if he's not already, thrown Darren Waller on injured reserve before the auction. And then that way you would have saved half his cap hit from this year. And then next year you can cut him. Because the problem of releasing him this year, the problem would have been if you release a player in year 2 of a 4-year contract, it actually Like you'll save half the cap space for that season if you do it before the auction. But the next year after you cut him, so if he cut them this year, his 2025 cap would be essentially no savings at all because it moves all of the next year's dead cap forward 1 year. So it's not on the books as long, but it really messes your cap for the next season. So it wouldn't necessarily mess up as much in 24, but if you cut him in 24, it would have really messed things up in 25. So the best thing to do with those contracts is eat him for the year on IR, because I imagine this league doesn't have amnesty for retired players. You sign him to the contract, doesn't matter that he retired, you still owe him that money. I've played in some RSO leagues that, player retires, they'll just remove the cap space automatically. But I've also played in other leagues where that's not the case. So you got to be really careful with who you sign. I'd imagine that's the case here. So yeah, you can throw Waller on injured reserve this year. This team has like $17 million in cap space though, so it's not like they need the extra $13 million. They can probably still make trades through the season, but if they ever need it, that's there. Throw him on injured reserve. He's there for the year. You save half the cap space, and then next year you release Waller. But that's still a lot to just deal with right now. Have that roster spot taken up. The tight end room is nice. You got Dalton Kincaid on a rookie contract. 1 year of Noah Fant. Really, next year you just kind of do another 1 year, $1 million contract for Kincaid's backup and go from there, because I think Kincaid will be solid. But man, that Darren Waller contract, I instantly kind of noted that, and okay, that's probably going to be a team I'm putting towards the back end. And sure enough, as I went through and I was ranking, no team seemed worse to me, even the Bobby Trees team. Lamar and Goff is nice, but it's only 2 years each, and Lamar's salary is like double what Dak's is. So to me, getting Dak on 3 years and cheaper than Lamar on 2 years, I much prefer him. I just like having Dak's contract straight up over Lamar, even though I think it's a dynasty asset, and redraft in any format, we'd all prefer to have Lamar to Dak. But just because of how good the Dak contract is at the top end, I'd rather have that. Certainly would rather have Love for 2 years than Jared Goff for 2 years. It's slightly less money as well with Love. And then you look at, T. Higgins is the best receiver, really. Actually, I guess it's Chris Olave. But that's actually the first question I'll ask for you guys. Outside of maybe trying to get a longer-term quarterback. But I think the big decision is Chris Olave. So his fifth-year option will be coming up next year. So you have all of 2024 to play out before having to make that decision. But my first question to you guys, would Chris Olave be a guy you'd pick up the fifth-year option on?
To me, I think it would depend on how his season goes this year, right? I mean, we've been kind of waiting for that Chris Olave that we drafted, a couple of years ago in Dynasty, and we just haven't seen that super elite upside yet. Now, maybe he shows it this year, and then he's worth picking up the fifth-year option, but I definitely would like to see what he can do first this year before I make that decision. You said I have until next year to make that decision.
Yeah, 3 days before the auction. So you not only have through the season, but you also have probably through the NFL draft, through free agency and all that before having to decide.
Yeah, I'm definitely waiting.
Oh, was there a trade that was made? Okay. Interesting, because it's funny because I actually thought of some scenarios where, this team has multiple players on fifth-year options, maybe like that would next year that would come up, maybe trade that to one of the teams that doesn't, so it gives them an extra bit of protection. So I wonder, did Dad Life have any other players? I have my notes here. I guess, Dad Life does have another player he could pick up the fifth-year option on. I also, for those in the chat to clarify, I assume you can only pick up one fifth-year option, because I noticed with some teams they seem to only pick up one player when they could have done it for two feasibly. I know in my leagues, you can pick up as many fifth-year options as you have first-round players. So if you traded for all 12 picks and you made all 12 first-round picks in a year, and you conceivably had the cap space to fifth-year option all 12, you could. But I imagine with this league, again, for the sake of putting more players in the auction, they limit it to one fifth-year option. They picked up a first rounder, a second rounder for Olave. And to your point, Jeff, if they were hesitant on picking up the fifth-year option, this just gave them, I think they said rookie contracts are 3 years. This just gave them 6 years of player contracts worth for the sake of essentially probably just this last year with Olave, and they would have let him walk to free agency. On a team that I don't love their chances to compete, go for the full rebuild. As much as you think, Olave, young player, that's someone you want to build around in a rebuild. The way that his cap space was about to go up, and you might have limit yourself that way. It might just be better to get picks for him. So I actually like that move for Catalina Wine Mixer. And again, the idea of that's the picks to I think the long-term solution at quarterback might be there. Even like, can you use Jared Goff to upgrade for a longer-term QB2, or just straight up trade for like a longer-term QB3 for now? But as Goff and Lamar leave to free agency, you have someone to pick up the slack, and you still have a quarterback at that point 2 years down the line. I guess 3 years down, 2 years down the line. Right now, It looks like Lamar and Goff would go through 2025.
Yeah, I think he got Tony Pollard in the deal.
4 years, right? 4 years. Okay, so and Tony Pollard. Interesting. So like again, 8 years of, they're saying rookie contracts are 4 years. Sorry, yeah, right. I was saying 5th-year option. Of course, I knew they were 4 years. Duh, Kyle. Too many numbers floating around. I'm usually pretty good with the numbers. But yeah, Olave for first, second, Pollard, and Dulcich. And I remember looking at Dulcich contracts, not too bad. Again, like with this team with Kincaid, you really don't. The rest of your tight ends probably don't matter so much. You're probably just playing. I mean, tight end premium, so you could flex one of those guys. But yeah, wouldn't stress about the tight end position too much from there. It really is now. If you're gonna trade for more players, it's probably at quarterback. That's where you really want to upgrade, and then go year to year at running back, because they've got like Singletary on a 1-year deal, Chuba Hubbard expiring rookie contract, Khalil Herbert 1-year deal. Outside of Tajay Spears and I guess Audric Estime now, they don't really have any long-term players at running back. You still fill that position 1 year at a time. So I think, yeah, if you're ever going to spend capital towards players, it's probably at quarterback.
So let me ask you, Kyle, without getting into like the specifics of all the teams in here, would you have ranked this team a little bit higher had they made this trade before we broke it down? With the
Not really, because I think it's still the Waller contract that kind of puts it at the bottom for me. So probably not.
Gotcha. And he does have Waller on IR. I know, just a peek behind the curtain for the league mates in here, these guys only get a spreadsheet of your rosters. I basically run your league through Fantasy Pros, which spits out the rosters in a nice, neat little Excel sheet. So I send it to these guys, and that's how they break it down. So they got the Excel sheet version, so they weren't able to see some of the updates that we can see now with the trades and the name changes and everything else. So that's kind of what's going on there. But yeah, he does have Waller on IR. And I think you said before, Kyle, that once they're on IR, they can't come off IR, not like a regular dynasty league.
Yeah,
they're on IR for the season.
Exactly. Well, and you know what? RSO is updated to now. Like, we used to do this manually where like our commission would say, okay, one IR player was allowed to return. RSO has actually updated that feature to now that is an on-site feature. So you'll typically, if the commission allows us, they have got to turn it on. But if they do, you're allowed to one player to come off IR during the season.
Good stuff.
So it's a little less restrictive, but yeah, like a guy like Waller, who isn't playing, that's the perfect guy to just stick on IR and save that money, and then again cut him next year. You'll have to eat probably like $14 to $15 million in dead cap each of the next 2 seasons, but you're saving that much on those years and after what you've already spent. Gonna think of saying something else, but I think we're good. If the trade changes anything, I think I might actually have ranked Dad Life's team higher now. Knowing they're adding Olave, even if they're spending firsts, it does give them some optionality though with that 5th-year option, because I think that they have another candidate, and that'll be actually now an interesting debate to get to when we get to that team in a little bit.
All right,
good job, Dad Life.
Let's go ahead and get to team number 10.
Number 10.
Number 10 team, ranked as high as 8 and as low as 10. It is Travis Laws. Brian, this is your team.
All right. Hopefully your middle name is Breaking and quarterbacks. There's definitely some youth and upside there with Caleb, JJ McCarthy, and Bryce, but there's also risk, right? We've got 2 rookies, one already injured for the year, and Bryce, we're kind of hoping for that bounce back. I think he will bounce back at least a good chunk, but I don't think anywhere near the ceiling we once thought he had. So quarterback seems a little thin and risky to me. Running backs, I think your ratio is pretty good, and you have some 0 RB guys that I tend to target, but I think overall it's kind of meh and top heavy. I don't like to have a very top heavy running back group. So for those listening, we're looking at Pacheco and Kamara, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, Braylon Allen, Kamani Vidal. It's Vidal, and I keep pronouncing it the wrong way. And CEH, and then also Samaje Perine, who's about to get cut or traded, and Jamal Williams. For wide receivers, I'd say they're solid, but maybe lacks a top end stud. I happen to love Brandon Ayuk and think he is underrated as a talent, but his as much as the team is good in some ways, the team being so good and spreading the ball around caps his ceiling a bit. And then there's Rashee Rice and Ladd McConkey and Josh Downs and Keon Coleman. Good youth there. I tend to be a little lower than consensus on Rice, but he's certainly a good asset. I tend to be a little higher than consensus on Ladd, but solid. I think either way. I tend to be higher than most folks on Downs. The problem is coming back from that high ankle sprain. How will he look? Keon has been flashing more and more. Seems to be showing some growth in camp. So there's definitely some spike week upside there. And then you've got Troy Franklin and Zay Jones, who just got suspended for 5 games. Tight ends, I would say they're very good overall. And if you have tradable assets, it's probably in this group where you have Laporta, Kelsey, and Freiermuth. So for Laporta, I tend to be lower than some folks on him, but he's still a very good asset, top 5-6 tight end in Dynasty. Kelsey, he's interesting. I think what we're going to see more and more this year, and if he plays the next, is sort of that load management, right? And so, he's going to be, I think, a good asset to trade when the season is kind of on the line, right? So, like, if you're okay and you're contending, then you're keeping him. If you're not, that's definitely a piece that I would move. And hopefully you don't have a trade deadline, so that usually makes things easier.
Oh, no, RSO, I think we'll always have a trade deadline.
I'm flipping tables.
Part of trade
deadlines.
I don't think you can turn it off in this league. So, I always vote to push it as late as possible. Like push it to the end of the regular season. Baby.
Yeah. And then we got Pat Freiermuth. There's some division over how good he's going to be this year. I think he's going to be a little better, almost from the there ain't nobody else besides Pickens kind of way. But still, I think there are things that he can do that can fit the quarterbacks and can fit the Arthur Smith offense that likes to use tight ends. Anyway, you've got pretty good cap space, and you've got the number 3 pick in all 3 rounds. So that's pretty decent there too. So as far as areas of improvement, I would look for a more floor at your quarterback group. I would fix the age and top heaviness at running back. And I would maybe try to acquire a better wide receiver 1 as you're making these moves and shifting the value around.
Yeah, this team was I was lowest on this team, but it really wasn't. The roster is solid, right? You got some good young players that Brian outlined already, and it was more about just getting pushed down from the teams that are kind of above them, which is why I had him at 10. Brian had him the highest at 8. Kyle, you had him right there in the middle at 9. So we're all pretty close in that little same range there. But is there anything contract-wise that we missed here, Kyle?
So I'm trying to think. I think one of the reasons I was a little lower was Kamara and Pacheco, like Brian mentioned. Those are the 2 guys at the top. The contract structures are what the opposite of want to be. Pacheco's only a 1-year contract. Well, there's 3 years left on Kamara's contract. If that was reversed, I might have this team ranked a little higher. But just like I'm saying with Kyron Williams, with Kamara, I mean, we've seen him just do it every year. But 3 more years seems hard to bank on. So I don't love that contract, but it might be really difficult to move. A lot of rookie contracts, like everyone other than Ayuk and Zay Jones. Other than those 2, all the receivers on rookie contracts, so it makes that core not only good if they're really productive, but it won't take up too much cap space. I think this team does have a lot of cap space, $22 million this year, and nothing really escalating, like no 5th-year options coming up. So it will be active. Like again, part of there's so little ways to keep players. Cap space is probably even more important in this league than it would be in normal RSO leagues, because there's every year it seems like there'll always be even better and elite players in the auction that you can't keep. Those veteran players, when they're done, there's no way to keep them for the next year. It's just the first round rookies. So if you drafted a first rounder and they hit, you get that 1 extra year at the end of the rookie contract. But other than that, you've got to have the cap space to fight. And this team does have cap space. So I think that's, having the 3 rookie quarterback contracts between Williams, McCarthy, and not a rookie this year, but still 3 more years of Bryce Young super cheap is helpful. But if this team wanted to compete, those might actually be the best tools in order to do that. Trade a J.J. McCarthy away and get a veteran quarterback that's more expensive, but that will help you produce if this team is contending this year. Because we talked like just that last team talking about Jared Goff, right? Needing to find that long-term answer. Do you sell Jared Goff away for one of these rookie quarterbacks? And like, what's the price difference between that there? And so like for Travis Laws, that might be a way if they acquire Goff, suddenly that's, Goff, Caleb might be passable as a, there we go, had pun again, as a QB 1 and 2 combo that can lead this team to the playoffs.
Yeah, good breakdown. And then they did mention in the chat, and we had it on the show sheet too, but the fact that he got Kelsey and Laporta with the tight end premium, and even got Pat Freiermuth thrown in the mix there as well. So really embracing that tight end premium side of things as well.
Never flex a running back. You've got depth for the 2 RB spots, but your flex spots are going to be wide receivers and tight ends. I think that was another reason why I had them 9 and say maybe not 10 closer. Again, the Kamara and Kyron teams next to each other. I think the next team we have is just a few more questions I had. So, and this tight end room certainly at the end of the lineup, you get there and say, okay, that boosts it a little bit.
Fair enough. All right, let's go ahead and get to team number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 team, probably the most disparity that we've seen so far in the show, at the high of being 7 and the low at 10. It is Jackie Moon. Kyle, this is your team.
So yeah, Jackie Moon. Again, it's I think the same problem we had 2 teams ago. 2 quarterbacks with just 2 years left, and then Garoppolo, which I think is even worse than Russell Wilson. He actually makes more than Russell Wilson. I think it was a contract that was signed like 2 years ago, and this was the 3rd year of it. So
yeah, he's not passable.
no, it's like that, but they don't. This team doesn't have Lamar. It's Cousins and Stafford. Like I'd much rather, even if you're paying up that much for Lamar, I'd rather have that than these 2. So that kind of hurt it. Love having Gibbs, rookie contract. That's nice, and even having the David Montgomery handcuff. I know Brian said it too, and I don't love handcuffing running backs, but this almost seems like the team to do it for, because, like, frankly, David Montgomery is probably this team's RB2 anyway, so you just play both of them, and if one of them gets hurt, the other will increase in value, and then you just figure out your RB2 spot. So I don't hate that, and I also like that it is just for 1 year, so you don't have to like commit to long-term having Montgomery. So from this year, last year, Gibbs and Montgomery, if that was your RB1 and 2 on a team and you were set at every other position, you probably definitely would like contribute to a league winner, or certainly on a deep playoff run. But yeah, Cousins, Stafford, I'm not sure that's enough though to keep up. Like I love what that potential is for that running back room. Some good productive wide receivers like Puka. Well, I think Hollywood Brown is really productive, but some people hate him. But I think he'll smash this year with the Chiefs once he gets back to health. I tend to be higher on Jordan Addison than consensus. I think even with the poor quarterback play, he'll still draw a lot of targets. So, and who knows if all the hype on Odunze is real, like there's some good productive receivers. And again, just like the last team with Odunze and Addison, receivers on rookie contracts. Now Puka, I think they said there was just 3 rounds, right? So yeah, slipped through the rookie draft last year. So this is a pretty expensive contract right off the bat. I also think he's worth it. The 3 years, $60 million for Dontavian Wicks, though, I don't like that one. And I think so. A couple factors: the QB, I preferred the last team's QB room. Just having Caleb already, that 4-year rookie contract for a quarterback we think will be really good. I love it, but having 3 rookie quarterbacks, that's a lot. I guess with Bryce, that's still 3 years left. That's a lot of time future-wise for quarterbacks that isn't spending too much money. So I like that. And then, yeah, the Kamara contract's bad. Could argue the Wicks contract is just as bad, because I don't even, like, at least with Kamara contract, like this year, expect him to get a lot of fantasy points. I'm not sure that's the case for Dontavian Wicks. I still clearly view him as the 4th or maybe even 5th receiver on the Packers. Because here's the thing. He's not better than Christian Watson. Watson's healthy, like that's set. Jaden Reed is a completely different role than Wicks. Like if Reed gets hurt, they'll find another way to a different receiver to replace the slot target. So like that's not really his route. His route is to be better than the best route runner on the team, which is Romeo Doubs. Like to me, those top 3 seem pretty set. An injury, he might be the next guy up. I'll be honest, I'm not convinced that he's better than Bo Melton. I think either of them could just fill in that role and dominate. So I have a hard time investing in Wicks, especially this big of a he can thank Todd for the Wicks contract. Was it a trade? Like, was this a trade that happened this year?
There was a trade, but it looks like I'm trying to figure out because they said that there was a trade, but it looks like Addison was part of the trade. So I don't know what Trenton Laws is talking about. He says he can thank Todd for the Wicks contract.
Okay.
Maybe they'll explain it.
I got to say, like, Jake Ferguson, Kittle, like, that's two solid tight ends and have them long term, and it's not, like, super expensive. Yeah. So, with all that context, I would say, like, one thing I can't get over that Cousins Stafford room. It's, like, to me, one of the weaker quarterback rooms of this league. So that also led me to that and the Wicks contract. I think that's what really combined to have me rank it at 10th, and I guess I was the lowest on it.
Yeah, it was a trade. It looks like it was a trade for that Wicks contract.
Okay. Man, hope you got some like good draft compensation for that. Like, to take on that contract is, oh man, I'd definitely charge the other person well over max value for it.
Brian, real quick, I want to get your thoughts. You had this team ranked the highest. I know, we're not as versed as the contract side of things, but just from a dynasty perspective, why'd you like this team so much?
Yeah, I think overall it's just a solid roster with some tradable pieces and some guys that I do like. And I look at the ample cap space, and I think the number 2 pick in every round, if I have that right. Trying to see in my handwritten notes here. What was this team name again? Oh, yeah, Jackie Moon. Okay. Yeah, the second pick in all 3 rounds, right? So, I mean, that and the ample cap space, that kind of put it over the top, because I do like to see that. Really, for me, like between 12 and say team 8 were not hard, but like kind of a chunk, kind of a tier. But then also like 4 through 8 was kind of like a kind of flat. And so I think we're getting into that area where some teams start to be a little bit more interchangeable.
Fair enough. All right, let's go ahead and get to team number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team ranked as high as 6, as low as 9. It is BL Relax. Brian, take it away.
Frankie says, relax. Yeah, I guess I'm the high man on this one too. I ranked them 6th overall. When I look at your quarterbacks, it's one of those quarterback groups where I say, okay, they're solid overall, but do we have a stud? We've got Tua, Baker, and Geno. Good trio to go into a season with, especially if you've got some valuable pieces elsewhere. But, I don't think there's a whole lot of ceiling there. And then Minshew, Howell, and Zach Wilson, as far as, your depth, I don't think you need all 6, but, solid room overall. Running backs, I think they're mostly old and or kind of mid, but, we're starting to have one of those teams where I think the ratio is decent. So you've got Saquon and Mostert at the top. Then you've got Jaleel McLaughlin, J.K. Dobbins, cross your fingers, really rooting for him. And then Antonio Gibson and Rico Dowdle. So, it's not the running back group that I would build, and I wouldn't have that much age at the top of my running back pecking order. But, it's definitely probably a competitive roster with that running back group. And I think we have the same thing going on with wide receivers that we do at quarterbacks. We're very solid at the top, but do we have studs? Do we have A1? I love Tank Dell. I think, again, as I said with Ayuk, there's a little bit of a ceiling cap there. Debo C. Ayuk, I think there's ceiling cap there. He's 29. And then we've got Lockett and Gabe Davis. You're starting to get kind of mid here, and then Chark and OBJ, who are, I don't barely rosterable really. And so, there's really no elite stud at the top. Tight ends are okay overall. I think Kmet is an interesting guy this year because, Shane Waldron likes to run that tight end by committee, and he brought in Gerald Everett, with whom he has history. And we have 3 very solid wide receivers there and a rookie quarterback. So I don't know. Like I've definitely knocked Kmet down in my rankings recently. Tucker Kraft, again, like I like the player, and there's definitely a role for him in that offense. but you're looking at 6, 7 good pass catchers, if you're including Bo Melton in there on that team, and they're going to spread the ball out. So, I'm just wondering how much any one of them is really going to eat, Cade Otton, he's a route runner, I think he was number 2 at the position or number 1 in routes last year. What'd that get him? I think it's just because he's the tight end 1 on a team that, has not had, great pass catching options. And Elijah Higgins, for those folks who don't know, I can't believe I'm spending this much time on this mid tight end room, but was a wide receiver convert. At the Senior Bowl, they said go work with the tight ends. I mean, he was originally a Dolphin. I think it was a UDFA or a 7th rounder, and now on Arizona. And I don't even know if he's going to make the team, so I don't think he's really rosterable. You have decent cap space, no 3rd round pick. So I think there's just a lot of mid here. I want to see this roster get some juice. I want to see that you get younger at the top of your running back group. I want you to try to get a stud wide receiver, a stud quarterback. So you've definitely got some things to move, like, you have cap room, you've got depth at tight end, you've got a number of running backs and a couple of them tradable to contenders. So I want to see you massage this and move the value around to different places to try to increase the ceiling and upside on the team, because ceiling and upside wins championships, not stacking small wins.
Looks like there was a trade in this team as well.
God dang it.
They had a lot of activity since I guess I uploaded this spreadsheet to y'all.
Well, I think that the Wicks trade, I think, happened before. Like we have that into account, right? Like Wicks is
that one was in there. Yep.
And I think both of those trades had to do with I think the team that's coming up in 2. So I guess that's what, team number 6.
Yeah, this team looks like it traded Tank Dell and I guess Zach Wilson were traded for Keenan Allen and Rashid Shaheed. I don't understand the trade. I mean, I've heard of some contract stuff on the backside, Kyle, that you'd understand more.
I mean, not really. Like Keenan Allen and Tank Dell are both on 2-year deals. So, I mean, Wilson, it's like Wilson's got 1 year left. Shaheed's a minimum contract. So he's actually pretty good value for the production. I get it from, I suppose, from BL Relax's perspective, only having 5 wide receivers on the team, and one of them was Odell Beckham and the other one was DJ Chark. Like, do you even want to count them? Like, it was just down to Gabe Davis, Deebo Samuel, Tyler Lockett, Tank Dell. They've now got 2, like an extra starter essentially. Yeah, you take out Tank Dell, but you have Keenan and Shaheed. So I think it makes sense for them. But man, like 2 cheap years of Tank Dell, I think is pretty sweet. So I mean, Zach Wilson's almost useless.
Yeah.
Whatever. I guess
that's why I figured
Infinity and Bijan, they already have 3 quarterbacks. So like adding Wilson probably doesn't do much. But like, honestly, if you got to cut him this year, it's probably like it's a bit of dead cap, but it's still a rookie contract, so it's not a big deal. But getting Tank Dell for that extra year, I kind of like. And I think for both of these trades, getting off of Dontavian Wicks, essentially to get 1 year of Devontae Adams, and then doing this to get multiple. Like you make up for that by getting Tank Dell. I like both trades in combination with each other, because you essentially you take 3 years of Wicks and you turn it into 3 years of Adams and Tank Dell combined. Like that's genius to me. Like you just increase the upside of the wide receiver room for this year, but also long term. So I don't hate the deals for the other 2 teams, but I especially love them for, again, team number 6, which now after these 2, well, especially after this trade, I might even rank them a little higher than I did. But
look at Kyle giving spoilers for the rest of the countdown. Jeez,
sorry,
you're breaking the rules. It's against protocol.
You're right.
All good. The team, to be fair, the league broke protocol too. Not supposed to make any trades once I pull the roster.
So
we're just breaking rules tonight, right? We're breaking laws.
Brian said something at the end. I just want to readdress it, like talking about upside wins championships, and I agree. I don't think there's a true tight end one, a true wide receiver one, or quarterback one, but I could see how Tua is a quarterback one. I could see the scenario where that happens. So like I actually like this quarterback room. It's Tua for 4 years, Baker for 3, Geno for 2. So you've got them kind of staggered. So you're not like you're not having 1 year where you're losing all 3 of them. Especially having 2 of the longest makes sense. So I really would think address wide receiver and tight end. Those would be I think to me, those would be the spots I would upgrade. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that 100%.
Use Cole Kmet, maybe the fact that he's on a 3-year contract, use that, add a draft pick, go into the top 8 tier of tight end, for instance.
Yeah, I would say quarterback would be the least pressing of those needs. Yeah.
Got a deeper team than most do. Like not a lot of guys have this team really has 4 starters if you want to count Gardner Minshew. Like most teams don't even have 3 solid for the year. So yeah, that's I don't love the J.K. Dobbins contract, but it's only 2 years. It's not as expensive. It's like about $10 million per year. So it's like 2 years. Okay, I don't love it, but I also don't hate it as much as say like Kamara for 3 or Kyron for 3. Even if I don't expect much from Dobbins this year. So, but having Saquon probably means okay, you can at least count on him as the RB1, and that's where the other positions upgrade. So yeah, try and add to Kmet to get a tight end 1. Just flat out buy another wide receiver. I don't know. I don't know if any of these guys can be used as like trade chips or you want to add to this room. But yeah, I think those will be the way I go. Try and upgrade a tight end and wide receiver.
All right, good stuff. Let's get to team number 7.
Number 7.
All right, now here's where we get into some pretty big disparities, and I'm assuming because Kyle has his team ranked the highest, it's contract related. But it has been ranked as high as 3 by Kyle, as low as 10 by Brian. I had this team at 7. Kyle, this is your team. It is ringers.
With some of these trades, I might not rank them 3rd, but they'd still probably be in the top 5, just because, like, especially one of the teams, I think they were close enough where, yeah, I think a couple of trades discussed here tonight might be enough to bounce them ahead. But Herbert, 4 years and not that expensive. Like I think average of $37.8 million is what I calculated. Conversely, like Lamar is making like $66 million for the next 2 years. So relative to what the other elite quarterbacks are making for their salary, like Herbert's pretty good. And then it's also 4 years. So right off the bat, frankly, like I feel like Herbert's one of my favorite contracts. And the fact is, yeah, that's true. Jamie, kickers suck. There's no kickers in this league too. It's why I honored this league by wearing the no kickers T-shirt.
Love it.
I figured it was super appropriate for this specific league. But yeah, I think so. Right off the bat, Herbert was one of my favorite contracts the whole league. I've spent a lot of time talking about my least favorite contracts, but in terms of favorite, I feel like Herbert's one of them. I feel like he's being super undervalued. It was a 4-year deal signed this year, so this was a guy that was in the auction, and I think he probably should have gone for more, but maybe people are hesitant with this Greg Roman offense. It'll be super run heavy. We'll see. I think it's a good buy low opportunity on Herbert. So I think they got Herbert cheaper than they should have and locked in long term. So right off the bat, they're great. They've got the most cap space in this league. And again, talking about what that means for the value of like next year, this could be a team that easily adds CeeDee Lamb because they can just bully everyone into, okay, he's the best player in the auction. I'm just going to go and demand that I win him, and the rest of you can't do anything about it. So there's a bit of power in that. They've also got options with the 5th-year option. From what I've calculated, they have 3 rookie pick or first rounders from the 2022 draft, which means next year they'll have 3 players they could use the 5th-year option on. Now, again, I think they can only actually use it on 1. That gives you 3 options. So I suppose if that's where you guys want to go next, we can discuss like what to do with the 5th-year option players. For again, you have until next year to decide this, but there's James Cook, Jamison Williams, and Christian Watson, all with the potential to sign for those 5th-year options. So I suppose one option is none of them, but I feel like this team has enough cap space that you're probably going to want to keep a good player. So I guess just flat out between the 3, and again, we'll give an answer now, but obviously the final answer doesn't have to be until next off season, almost a year from now. But as it stands right now, who would you think you'd want to put the 5th-year option on? James Cook, Jamison Williams, or Christian Watson?
I think at face value, I'm taking James Cook only because, we don't know what Jamison Williams is going to do this year. Christian Watson can't stay healthy. So if I had to put a 5th-year option on any of those guys, I'll go James Cook. Where do you fall, Brian?
Listen, I'm the resident JMO stan, still keeping the candle lit. But it would be down to the other 2 for me. And I think when I think about the Watson upside and the fact that he's a wide receiver and not a running back, I'd probably give him the 5th year.
Yeah, I think because it's only 1 extra year and you're not like saying I'm giving a 4-year extension past the rookie draft. I think if that was the case, I think you definitely would bank on Watson's longer term value. But because it's just 1 extra year, I think I lean Cook. I guess next year, like if you take all these players away, what do they have? In theory, their running back 1 right now would be DeAndre Swift still next year, unless Charbonnet can supplant Ken Walker. I know Brian tends to think he might. I tend to lean on no, but we'll find out. If you look at the rest of the receivers, like they'll still have Calvin Ridley next year, Xavier Worthy on year 2 of a rookie contract. I think this team probably needs the running back more than the wide receiver. They could it's probably easier to get wide receivers in the auction too, just because it'll be just a deeper position. They'll just end up being more, and that's the same. It was 24 million this year for CeeDee Lamb. I'd imagine the escalators go up. It's probably going to be slightly more. I know the 5th-year option. I think it works like the franchise tag, which is essentially like the. Okay, so you could do multiple. Interesting.
Yeah, he could do all 3 if he wanted.
I don't. Well, yeah, I don't. I mean, as Brian said, he's the Jameson Williams truther. It sounds like he wouldn't do it at all. Even if like Williams is the only one, you'd rather just the cap space. I'm like the most Jameson Williams hater. So yeah, very clearly don't do Jameson Williams. This team has enough cap space though to potentially, 5th-year option both James Cook and Christian Watson. Because my next thing was going to be choose to the 5th-year option on one and then sell the other one to a player that doesn't have a 5th-year option. Like, this team has 3 first-rounders in 2022. And by the way, based on like what I looked at, like the salaries for the rookies from that year, it looks like 3 first-rounders have already been cut. So there's actually only 9 players eligible for the 5th-year option at this point. Because it looks like Kenny Pickett, Treylon Burks, and Sky Moore are no longer on rookie contracts. And based on I think that after the 9 players that I had identified, the next highest in salary was like George Pickens, but it was such a large drop that it looked like this looks like the second round guys like Pickens and who else? Like Alec Pierce, maybe. I can't remember. There was a few guys that these all look pretty close and they're bunched together that makes them all look like second rounders. And there was a big gap. So I'm assuming Pickett, Burks, and Sky Moore were all first rounders. They've all been cut. So they're on their new contracts. They're not eligible for that 5th-year option, which also means it's a slightly more scarce asset, the 5th-year option, than it is most years, especially if one team's got 3 of the first rounders from that season. So you can use that power, I think, by whichever one you don't want to use the 5th-year option on, could conceivably sell James Cook or Christian Watson. JMO probably, because I don't know that anyone would pick up the 5th-year option on JMO. If anyone would, it'd be this team because they have the most cap space. So I'd imagine that one's probably not an option for that. So again, figure out which one you'd prefer and then sell the other, I suppose, whether it's between Cook and Watson. That was going to be my talk. I was also under the assumption that you could just use one 5th-year option, but I guess if they're saying you could use all 3 or as many as you have, then there's maybe less incentive to need to trade. You could just keep both.
Right. That makes sense. All right. Anything you wanted to say, Brian, before we get to team number 6?
No, I appreciate Kyle explaining where he's coming from. It just for behind the scenes, Kyle was the first to put the rankings in the sheet this time, and I went in there and he had 3, and I'm like, what does he see? So I think that definitely helps clarify it for me. But yeah.
And it's not just that they have the most cap space; it's just how much more they have than everyone else.
Yeah, they got a ton more.
More than double, like more than triple most teams. So it's
almost $71 million.
In this league, I think that's significant enough that especially next year, they could really be a bully in the auction. So
had I fully processed the no extensions setting, I think maybe that would have changed things. I'm like, oh, so those teams can't extend, and I got this money. So
yeah. And then Jay's in the chat. He's a going for 2 guy. He's been flirting with RSO for 3 years, so maybe our PLP here will push him over the top and make him make the leap into RSO. Jay, if you start a league, let me know. I'll jump in with you.
Yeah, I'm always down to join an RSO league. I know Jamie's mentioned it too, because I've talked about it enough. But yeah, there could definitely be some options. I think Dee's even mentioned he would. I think I talked about it one time on Speak on It, and the key mentioned it too.
Good stuff.
Maybe we'll have it's probably better to let your player walk than pick up the 5th-year option for $20 million. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is you don't have to do it, right? Like if you think I can use that to get another player as opposed to the guy I have, then you can also just not pick them up.
Just not pick them up. Yep. All right, let's get to team number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 team ranked as high as 4, as low as 7, and Kyle alluded to a little bit earlier today.
Spoiled.
Yes, a little bit of a spoiler. It is 2 Infinity and Bijan. And Brian, this is your squad here.
Excuse me. Let's read the full name. I believe there's an undefeated champs in there as well.
Yeah.
let's give this person their due. Yeah. So this is the team that made some trades. So again, like I said, my notes are kind of based on the roster, and then we can go that I had, and then we can kind of like adjust, calibrate from there. I was the high man on this team, ranked them number 4. I think we've got some pretty good quarterbacks, definitely some risk with 2 rookies, and also I happen to be lower on Daniels than than really most folks. But Kyler really, in some analysts' eyes, has top 3 upside for 2024. So Kyler, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix, not bad quarterback group, but real risky. The RBs are. Obviously, we love Bijan. Bijan's elite, but my notes here are that we're a bit top heavy and we've got some age there, right? So I'm not really an Etienne guy relative to most people. He joins Bijan in sort of your top tier there. Trey Benson, Tyler Algier, James Conner, and Nick Chubb, although it sounds like this is the person that got Chubb and were current, or this was the person that traded Chubb?
Looks like he still has Chubb, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Chubb trade, like that one with Adams and Chubb, like that one was fine for our spreadsheet. It's the next trade that he did that we don't have.
Yeah, so like this is a team where I would like to have Benson or Connor, but not both. So that you might have heard us say this a couple times already, and I don't know how long people have been playing, so I don't want to offend you with trying to like be pedantic and teach you something. So I don't know what your knowledge base is, but the idea behind not handcuffing your own running backs is you essentially waste a roster spot, right? So in this case, I would have James Conner, but say, I don't know, Blake Corum, right? Because if James, like,
you'll never put James Conner and Benson in the lineup at the same time, right?
Right. You'll never put James Conner and Benson in the lineup at the same time, right? And so you need Conner to be hurt for Benson to be relevant, right? But if you replace him with Corum's got an out if some other guy gets hurt that you don't have. And then also those guys just become tradable chips as well when you've got somebody else's backup, So that's
really someone else wants to handcuff, it seems like, right? So you play off that, not only avoid it, but then trade people into that and like almost force people into handcuffs by just like selling.
Yeah. And listen, we're all rooting for Nick Chubb, but I'll pass on a 29-year-old running back in December coming off his second catastrophic knee injury. So
and making like $29 million this year.
Yeah.
it's not a fun contract.
Yeah. So we've got wide receivers again. They're solid, but then also some age and risk on board. Jamar Chase, obviously elite, happens to be my wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Then you've got Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Keenan, I guess, was traded, and Chris Godwin, right? So, the average age there is about 30.5 or something like that, right? So not something I love. And then you've got Shaheed, I guess, got traded. But Shakir, again, depending on who you ask, is either wheels up this year or mid. Palmer, kind of the same thing. He could be the wide receiver 1 because he's playing in 2 wide receiver sets. With LA. But when I look at this and I take out Keenan and Shaheed and I add in Tank Dell, it looks better to me, right? Because I like that young upside player more than I do carrying Keenan and sort of like I'll never know when to play Shaheed, spike week Shaheed, Your tight end situation is a little weird here. So again, we've got this sort of like handcuffing my own tight end thing with Zach Ertz and Ben Sinnott. Really no need for that. Sinnott is going to be the guy eventually, just like McBride was the guy eventually. And so, Ertz is just not a piece I want to roster. And so I would have Bowers and Sinnott, but I would have a different third tight end. Now, Bowers, though, is elite, but also carries risk because of the bad offense. He happens to be my dynasty tight end 3. Love the guy, but there's definitely some risk there, right? Like anytime we're enthusiastically or not naming Minshew your starter in August, what would I do with this team? I might need some more floor at quarterback. I think you can get more back for Etienne than he probably is worth to you. And I would move off some of the age at wide receiver, which you've already done. and then I would tweak that tight end situation to look a little different. You know, I'm thinking maybe like if you're going to carry a third like veteran roll the dice tight end, Colby Parkinson, right, on LA's offense, who got 15.5 million guaranteed. You know, he's a guy. He's a guy I would look into as the third tight end there, right? So he's getting early production for you, and then when Sinnett's ready to be Sinnett, you know, you got it. But yeah, that's my spiel on To Infinity and Beyond, undefeated champions.
It looks like he added Colby Parkinson to his tight end room as well, off waivers, which I knew you were a fan. That's why I wanted to mention it. So yeah, that's a good pull there off the waivers.
Can you just go up to the top of the screen, Jeff, on the RSO site? So that says they have. Well, it looks like it's more cap space than they had before.
Yeah, 955,000.
They're at 100,000. So at least now it's okay. You can afford almost 2 minimum contracts extra. So it's this move to get Tank Dell. It actually did help them cap space wise, and again, it helped them I think long term as well. Like at least next year, you probably want Tank Dell more than Keenan Allen next year. It's funny how they handcuffed Godwin and Evans, but they also did it again at running back and tight end. I typically agree with Brian. I don't hate how they've done it, like at least how the contracts are structured. It's especially at running back. It's 1 year this year of James Conner, and then he's a free agent next year. I think the ideal, like that seems like that's the scenario for the Cardinals too. 1 year of James Conner, and then Trey Benson takes over. So at least like, you know, if you're looking at it long term, like okay, you're not losing a starter when you lose James Conner. In fact, you're getting a cheaper starter next year. So I don't hate that. The Sanat Ertz thing, yeah, it was strange, especially go like okay, 2 rookie tight ends. I can understand why they wanted veterans. Like you really want to start the season with just rookie tight ends. So like with Ertz and Sanat, I wonder if it's okay. I'm rostering Ertz until Sanat's the starter, then just cut Ertz. Heck, you might just start Brock Bowers off the rip anyway, and see what that gets you. But yeah, I think Nick Chubb is the one thing that now complicates it. Because again, this team still less than $1 million in cap space, and then next year Jamar Chase's 5th-year option kicks in. So suddenly next year, like he's on last year of a rookie contract. This year, you remember what his salary is? It's like $9-10 million. It's going to jump up. I think they think they're estimating $27 million for the 5th-year option next year. So where do they find the cap space to absorb that? Well, I mean, like again, Adams is on a 1 year, Evans is on a 1 year, Connor's on a 1 year. So you will have some cap space by just not having those guys, and that's maybe how you get Chase. You fit everything under the cap. I actually like Brian's idea of potentially selling Etienne. Now he is just on the 1 year, like this is the last year of his rookie contract. That also means his cap hit isn't huge this year. So there's probably, unlike say like a Nick Chubb, but that's probably a bad example, but like a veteran running back that's healthy, like the Kamara, for instance. There's not even a lot of teams that could even just take him on. There has to be like salary exchange back, and that could get really complicated if it's large amounts of salary. With Etienne, because it's still hit part of his rookie contract, it's not super restrictive, so it actually might be easier to move him. And if this team is thinking, Etienne's not part of the long-term future, chose to not pick up the 5th-year option, instead chose to just give it to Chase, that kind of says their intention of, okay, that not long-term. I think it does actually make a lot of sense, Brian, to try and see what Etienne will be worth, because even though it's just a 1 year contract, because it's so cheap, a would-be contending team might want to view that as a rental that they can get without it, like that they're even able to get without it like super being restricted to their cap. So yeah, try and shop Etienne. That might be a really good way to go about it. And like, even if you're just doing it for picks and you're not getting players back, that frees up some cap space this year to maybe make another move at tight end, trade for a veteran tight end that's a bit more productive than Ertz and Parkinson. It will cost a bit more cap space, but might actually increase the upside of the team.
All right. Great breakdown, gentlemen. Let's get to team number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 team, another big disparity here. We got as high as 2 and as low as 9. It is Nick Dillon. And Kyle, this is your squad.
That's true. I lied earlier. My favorite contract in the league is CJ Stroud's rookie contract. But that's, it's a given of the rookie nature of rookie contracts. But yeah, right off the bat, like that's it's still a team with lots of cap space. One of the higher extremes of that. I also don't hate that it's 2 years of Joe Mixon, 2 years of Derrick Henry, 2 years of Aaron Jones. You've got this running back room for the next 2 years, and then it's gone, and you completely rebuild. But like you don't want any of those guys on 3-year deals because you expect them to maybe produce for the next 2 years. You can also, if one of them really does bad this year and looks like they're past the cliff, you can also cut them, 1 or 2 of them next year. But if all 3 are productive this year and they're productive next year, that's 2 solid years that you could have those running backs, and then it gives you until 2026 to really figure out your long-term future running back. You've got a solid core of those 3 for the next 2 years. But other than that, there's just Eric Gray. So you would like some more depth, to be fair. There's definitely easy things this team can do. Like they've got Treylon Burks and Michael Thomas both on minimum contracts. So you cut both of them, save all of the cap hits, which is barely anything. And then suddenly you've got, just add 2 extra running backs to this room, and suddenly you have 6. So there's simple, easy things that can do to increase that running back depth. Trying to think what else. Like, Elijah Moore on last year of his rookie contract. You cut him, you won't save any cap space, but you will open up a roster spot that you could just add another running back. So like Burks and Thomas are the easy ones because there's no cap penalty by cutting them. So I think right off the bat, just cut those 2, add 2 running backs. But I think this team has what we expect to be elite players on rookie contracts. So CJ Stroud, Marvin Harrison, Brian Thomas. And I think part of it might also be why I put this team to might just be my own bias, that if you gave me the choice of which teams I'd pick, I want the Stroud and Harrison contracts. I don't even care about what the rest of the team looks like. Those might be 2 of the best, especially if Harrison hits as we expect him to. Those are probably the 2 best contracts to have in the league. So I think the presence of those 2 contracts, which it's tough to trade for players on rookie contracts that are productive, because people understand I'm getting all these points and I'm not really spending that much cap space on them. It's it's the best of both worlds. So I think their presence, just those 2 specifically, and you could even throw in Brian Thomas that I'm pretty high on. That's what I think really pushed this team to the top. They have cap space. They've got at least 2, 3 solid foundational pieces on rookie contracts. And I think they've got room to add more. Don't love the QB room behind Stroud, but at least you're not paying any of them barely anything. Aiden O'Connell, $3.5 million is the biggest cap hit I think of any quarterbacks there. So it's you're gonna have to piece together who your QB2 is, and maybe that's how this team needs to make a trade to acquire a better QB2. That's probably honestly the priority. Schultz and Hurts at tight end, it's not bad, but it's just 1 year each. So you go year to year at tight end. So I'd rather invest draft picks and invest long-term plans more at the quarterback position. So I'm fine keeping that tight end room. Fine with the wide receiver room. I think it's great. Running back room, you just need more depth. And so then it leads to, if you're going to make trades, it's probably for a quarterback. Maybe use Will Levis on a rookie contract. I think we talked about that with the one team that had Caleb and Bryce Young and JJ McCarthy. It'd be the same principle here. You've got the cap space to afford going from a rookie contract quarterback to an expensive veteran. And that other team might, if they've got several veterans, they might want to get rid of one of those. Talked about the Stafford Cousins team, for instance. Does that team, if they're not, especially not competing so strong, do they want Will Levis? Is that viewed as a good rebuilding team? Maybe some might say Will Levis is only on a 1-year trial for the Titans and they're drafting another quarterback next year. But I would at least explore the possibility of you upgrade from Will Levis to a better quarterback, and you're not paying what you normally would because of the value of the rookie contract you're giving up.
Yeah, 100%. And I was talking to Chad about the disparity here between 2 and 9, and it's the difference between Kyle knowing the RSO format and the contracts and how they work, because CJ Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr.'s contract really put him at 2 for Kyle, whereas me and Brian were kind of just looking at this as dynasty rosters. I wasn't quite as low as Brian. Brian had him at 9. I had him at 4. But
there's also a bit of envy because I don't have those guys in dynasty. So if it was me taking over, I'd love to have it. Just okay, I finally have these guys in the dynasty league. It's great.
I think if you kind of know me and how I do things, I'm not going to look at a roster that has Joe Mixon and Derrick Henry as the top 2 running backs and like it, right?
Yep,
I'm not going to like goofy ass George Pickens and goofy ass Will Levis. I'm not going to like mid ass Dalton Schultz as your tight end there. I'm lower on Jaden Daniels, so I'm not loving McLaurin. Like, and I haven't even gotten to the bench yet, right? So, I mean, that's just it. I think even when I hear about these two like stellar contracts, okay, fine, but like I now have to carry, Joe Mixon, Quentin Johnston, Alec Pierce, Treylon, like, get out of here.
Well, like I said, cut Traylon. You don't have to worry about him. But yeah, you're right. Like it's. I might have ranked them a little too high just for like those two contracts are really pushing it forward for me. That and the amount of cap space they had. That's really what like set them in ringers to me in the top 3. And you guys clearly disagree with that. It's just, man, how much cap space these guys have, the potential of certain pieces. I would love to build around what they already have, and I think the cap space allows me the tools to build the rest of the team how I want. So
yeah,
that's really how I viewed that one. But
I have a quick
can understand
question
why.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just say I can understand why I'm higher on them than you guys. Like I can see why, like your points of just straight up players that these teams feel like they're missing something compared to other teams.
So Kyle, would you say in a league like this? So in my leagues, which full disclosure, I don't have the time to manage them like I should, so I should cut down on leagues. But I try to move toward that, like, never rebuilding and never like making like all-in trades that are like low letter value losers, And so I try to kind of keep some draft picks in the cupboard, some cheap point veterans, some young upside players, and just kind of, just keep at it like that. In this kind of league, is it easier to say like, okay, I'll onboard a Derrick Henry and a Mixon, I'll shoot for this year, but then I'll have all this cap space. Is it easy to kind of like repeatedly kind of do that, like reload like that in a league like this?
Yeah, if you have the discipline to like in the auction, you're signing these guys to shorter term contracts, which is why, again, I don't love the team that has Kamara on 3 years, because that idea of, he's not as productive, it coincides with the time where he's not on my team anymore anyway. So I'm losing that. So it's as long as they've got them on shorter term deals. And that's, I think, why I like this team too, is because they were all just 2 years. So you can stomach it. All 3 of them I expect to be really productive this year. I think I've got all 3 of them ranked inside my top 15 in redraft. So especially for this year, I like it. And then even next year, I could still see all 3 still being worth the production. If one of them falls off, you can just you cut him and it's just 1 year of dead cap. So it's not as, I think, restrictive. So yes, I agree. Yeah. To answer your question, Brian, yes, but it all depends on like how disciplined you are giving those guys just short-term deals and not going with the long-term.
All right, good stuff. Let's get to team number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4, we kind of all agreed on this team a little bit. As high as 5, as low as 4. It is Dad Life. Brian, this is your squad.
Yeah, so it's something I know nothing about, Dad Life, and I'm going to keep it that way forever, medically so as well. But I am Papa to two dogs who are little furry, vegan, middle-aged communists like me, and it's National Dog Day. So happy National Dog Day to everybody, the best day of the year. So
you're getting them groomed after National Dog Day and not before.
So
not open on Mondays. What can you say?
You've obviously got an elite top 2 quarterbacks here. For some people, the top 2 quarterbacks in Dynasty, right, with Mahomes and Allen. So you've got a lot going for you there. After that, we've got some question marks, and it's fair to say like, oh, well, I have Mahomes and Allen. Who cares after that? Well, there's injuries, there's bye weeks, that sort of thing. What do you think of Penix as far as player take, as far as when you think he's going to get opportunity? And then DTR, like, yeet, not even rosterable, really. Running back. So I like this team is interesting. They've got my ratio, but they've got the players reversed. So let me explain. In running backs, we've got a good number. We've got the ratio getting there for sure. But we have too much value storage in that position, right? So for those listening, we've got JT and Jonathan Brooks. We've got Rashad White, mid, inefficient, Tony Pollard, Jalen Wright, love him. Tyrone Tracy, love him. Keaton Mitchell, upside. And Donta Foreman, who's going to have like some goal line usage, right? But that's not what you should be doing. Then you have wide receivers. You have your solid top two, but arguably no stud, right? So your ratio is good, but you've got players reversed. Your value storage is in running backs. And so the thing is, you're supposed to have like a depth at running back, but like not be top heavy, right? And then be lean and mean at wide receiver, but they're mean, you know? And so what you've got is you're deep and mean at running back and lean and wimpy at wide receiver. So you got those things reversed.
Yeah.
I love Nico. He's probably a top 12, 13 dynasty wide receiver for me. DJ Moore, you know, remains to be seen what Odunze is going to do to him, but certainly a good, solid player. Jacoby Myers, Sutton, Dubs, and Polk. You know, I think you're going to get some cheap points there from the combination of those guys. But it's just not the way that I would build relative to who you have at running back. Tight ends are solid enough for a league like this. You've got some depth there, maybe even a tradable piece. Njoku, you know, again, people make a lot of the whole split between Watson and Flacco and that sort of thing. We've got a guy with elite athleticism and an offense that wants to pass more and is tight end friendly. So, you know, I'm okay with him in a 1.5, you know, as my tight end one. Although I usually take a tight end either before that bunch or like after that bunch. And Juwan and Dulcich are certainly, you know, good upside dice rolls as far as your tight end too. And Higbee, you know, obviously it's Colby Parkins season, but, you know, Higbee will be back at some point this year. So maybe that is some late points that are either going to be good for you or good as a tradable asset. We have kind of meh cap space, but good draft capital from what I see. We've got 3 seconds and 3/3. So, you know, I like that. So really what you need to do here is shift where the value is on your roster. You're storing too much value in running back. You want to shift that into wide receiver.
So
and
real quick, Brian,
add a stud there. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Real quick, so he did make that trade. He actually must have taken your advice before you actually gave it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So okay. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
And I think having Olave, like I think I was the highest on this team at 4. Like I might even go a little higher now, and maybe you know those last 2 teams we talked about, maybe drop 1 or 2 of them behind this.
Sorry, Olave, I forgot some of. Right. I forgot that trade. Yeah.
Nope, you're fine. For those listening out there, he traded Pollard 1 and 2 and got Olave back. So he traded one of his running backs away, a little bit of his draft capital, and he got Olave to get a little bit more top heavy as receiver.
I would have liked you to have gotten like a younger upside depth running back in with, because you gave up a lot there. Pollard a 1 and a 2. You know, if I'm being contract agnostic with that one, if I look at the Olave team, you know, I would have liked Spears.
But that for that one team, that's their only.
Right? Or like Chuba or Khalil Herbert, you know,
those guys are rentals, right? Like
I would have gotten one of those guys in the trade. Yeah, but so yeah, and then you know, obviously you've still got some pretty good cap space. You had picks to trade, so it's not like you have 0. So yeah, just massage that value storage and maybe think about tearing down from Josh Allen, right? So here's like unpopular opinion. I have Josh Allen as like 4 or 5 among my dynasty quarterbacks. And I think Pat Mahomes and the KC offense are about to go to the moon next year this year. So what I might do is find somebody who's got a little more faith in Allen, a little bit more quarterback need, and maybe trade down to like a Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott kind of range, and then add some pieces on top. And maybe even add like a 3rd string quarterback to that deal, or now you have, you know, some other chips, and then you can go get like a better quarterback 3 than DTR, right? So yeah, just a couple things that I would do, but certainly, you know, a good starting point with this squad. Yeah.
Because you started your analysis with Josh Allen and Mahomes all the way at the start, and now you've like come full circle to there, and we'll continue on that topic. Last week's episode, there was a team with Mahomes and Lamar, and I ended up actually ranking them first, and that was a big factor. But Mahomes was on a 4-year contract, and Lamar was on a 3-year deal. Now, this was, again, an RSO startup that just happened this year. So this is year 1 of that league, whereas these are contracts that were signed a couple of years ago, but there's still just 2 years left. And what I loved about Lamar and Mahomes for that other team last week was, you know, it wasn't just both 4 years. Like, okay, you'll have to deal with Lamar expiring 1 year, figure that out. And then the next year it's Mahomes expiring, you figure that out. So like you stagger it. This is, you've got 2 years with Allen and Mahomes, and then it's done. And then you've really just got Michael Penix at quarterback. So if it was staggered contracts and different amounts, I'd like that. So to Brian's earlier point, I love flipping Josh Allen for a Dak Prescott on a 3-year contract or a Justin Herbert on a 4-year deal. I love that. And you're stretching out your window. And honestly, I'm with Brian. Like, I think he's still number 3 for me in Dynasty, but I am a little lower on Allen than, like, I don't expect him to finish at QB 1 or 2 again. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens, but I have him ranked outside the top 2. So a slight dip for him might mean the production between him and Dak isn't all that different. It's still different, but enough like that you're saving a ton of cap space too. So I think that's a good factor for the trade. Interesting with Jonathan Taylor, the 5th-year option this year, and then he's a free agent next year. But then next year you've got Jonathan Brooks, Jalen Wright, Tyrone Tracy, all on rookie contracts. Do they start to kick in? Speaking of running back, one more thing though, it would reduce your running back depth, but I don't know about Keaton Mitchell this year. That injury looked pretty serious. It was late enough last year. I think they could have incentive to just IR him for the whole year. I think this team could have incentive to do the same thing. It's just a 1-year, $7.5 million contract. You save 3.75 in cap space, which I think at this moment would more than double. So like that might be enough to, I said, upgrade at tight end, because I think there might be ways to upgrade on David Njoku. So that might be one thing that helps you get enough cap space to do something like that. Now, the other thing to do with cap space is trading Josh Allen for a Herbert. That also saves a ton of cap space. So that makes the putting Keaton Mitchell on IR maybe less necessary. But now that Brian's back, the big question is, okay, this team now has Chris Olave. So next year, they can use the 5th-year option on Olave. And I know, Jeff, you already talked about, like, let's wait and see what he does this season. The other player they have, too, is Rachaad White. So that's one where I doubt this team has the full cap space right now without big trades. Again, like a Josh Allen trade that changes things, but outside of that, they probably only have the cap space to one 5th-year option. Essentially, what JT, with Jonathan Taylor's 5th-year option cap hit this year, that's, you're saving that next year. That's essentially what you'll use on next year's 5th-year option. So you could probably only have one of them. But between Rachaad White and Chris Olave, who would you guys prefer to use the 5th-year option on? Again, knowing we don't have to decide now, but if we had to decide now, what does it look like we'd project to do?
It's definitely Chris Olave. I'm not a big fan of Rachaad White, and I think Brian's nodding his head there. I think he agrees with me on that one.
Ditto.
You see, and I am a big fan of Rachaad White, and I would still say Chris Olave. So even the Rachaad White fans saying that, it's like he's survived 2 drafts in a row where, like, and again, Brian would say he hasn't because he likes Bucky Irving enough. But, like, what are the odds that by next year they don't, again, just draft another running back higher or sign someone in free agency, like that he really goes through all this year and all next off season without having his starting spot challenged? Again, and you might be able to go through all next year, see all that, and then make the decision to keep him for one season. But I expect Chris Olave to do well enough. Like, he hasn't had awful fit. It's not like he's producing like Drake London. Like,
right.
Drake London's been like outside the top 30 both seasons. Like, Olave is like he's wide receiver 18. He's wide receiver 24 the last, I think, something around those for his 2 seasons. It hasn't been awful. We want him to take that next step, but even if he doesn't and he just stays at what he is, I think he'll still be worth to have, again, if the cap space is there. So that's more, what's available, like to take the 5th-year option versus what's available in free agency next year. And if you just, if you just let Olave walk, then he is one of those players available in free agency. Do you think you could get him less than the 5th-year option? I think that's the real question. So passing on the 5th-year option for Rachaad White, I think we're all in favor of that. And then it's Chris Olave maybe, and you get to go through all next year and with more information and make that decision. But I definitely would strongly consider Olave if you have the cap space for it, because I think it at least for next year, because the problem is Nico Collins is on an expiring contract. So unless you prioritize Collins and say, okay, I want to spend big to keep Collins, so I'll do that in free agency, I think I'd rather just not having to bid against people for that. I'll just lock in the value of the 5th-year option on Olave, and I'll say that's my wide receiver 1 for this next season. Potentially DJ Moore as well. We'll see what happens with him and Caleb. But I right now I'm leaning on picking up the 5th-year option on Olave, but I could also understand why you just don't pick it up on either. So, and I wonder, does that mean, like, is Rachaad White tradable? Does someone want like the last year of his rookie contract, and maybe they want to pick up that 5th year option? So I'd look at the teams, and again, I think there's only like 5 teams or that have 5th year option players. So like more than half the league is like doesn't have that ability to make a 5th year option next year. So target maybe one of those teams and see, do they want Rachaad White on the last year of his rookie deal and having that option?
Yeah, I think Cody just asked that question in the chat right before you got to that, about White being a trade option. So yeah, 100%. Good call. All right, we are entering the top 3.
Number 3.
Number 3 team ranked as high as 2, as low as 5, and it is the original name of the football team. And Kyle, this is your squad.
Yeah, so with the football team, you know what? Let's keep the 5th year option conversations going, because they have what I think was the 102 and 103 in 2022 based on their salaries. They went Drake London at 102 and then Ken Walker 103. So clearly, flag planting on London there, and taking Ken Walker. Because like with London, it was which receiver are you taking first? And certainly after the NFL draft, you saw how high the Falcons took him. I'm pretty sure I didn't have him pre-draft as my wide receiver 1 in that class, but seeing that capital and wrongfully trusting the Falcons offense, I had him as the wide receiver 1 of that class. He's maybe failed to produce, but at this point, what would be your thought? Again, you can have all of next year play out, but at this point, would you rather pick up the 5th year option on Drake London or Ken Walker? This is a team that doesn't have a ton of cap space, so probably can't afford to do both. So probably again having to just pick one.
I think for me, it's Drake London, and I do think he will show this year that the draft capital they spent on him will be worth it. He finally has a quarterback, I think, that can get him the football. Kenneth Walker, I know Brian, has talked about Sharps a little bit last year. He's kind of lukewarm on Ken Walker. I like Ken Walker, but I'm not going to deny the fact that Sharps is still there and could potentially cut into that workload. So yeah, it's Drake London for me if I'm going to pick one of those two.
Yeah, I'm smashing London. I mean, absent some weird thing happening in Atlanta that a lot of us don't expect. I mean, he could be like a top 5 to 8 dynasty wide receiver next year. And just in general, he's a young upside wide receiver as opposed to a running back who gets hit a lot. So, yeah.
Now, what if he fails to meet the expectations we have on him this year? And if Charbonnet is, again, very clearly behind Walker, I could see the scenario where you actually, by next year, there still isn't an improvement and it's still not that step forward from London where you'd want Walker. But I also look at this team. Next year, they'll be losing Jalen Waddle, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Joe Burrow. So this might actually be a team where you don't want to pick up either. As much as it might be enticing because of these player names, you want to save the money to try and win back Joe Burrow or win back Amon-Ra. But that might be the bigger priority, is to save as much cap space for that. And if that's the case, then you're looking about, how can I move players under salary next year? 3 years left of Stephon Diggs, pretty expensive. Honestly, if he doesn't do well in Houston this year and he goes to a not so good situation, I'd consider cutting Diggs. He makes almost $40 million per season. So I think next year, you save about $20 million on what you already have against cap space. So you got to eat some dead cap. But if saving that $20 million and eating an extra $20 million dead, if that better than just eating the full 40, could that allow you to get a Joe Burrow back? Because next year it would be rookie Drake May and then 1 year rentals for Watson, Carr, and Rodgers. Which maybe if Drake May shows well enough, maybe you're okay with that. But I feel like right now I'd want to position myself to be able to win back at least Joe Burrow next year. And if you can't, okay, maybe then win back Amon-Ra and build through that wide receiver 1. But it feels like I'd lean to actually not picking up either 5th year option just to save money for that.
All right, good stuff. Brian, anything you want to chime in here on this team here? You had them highest out of the 3 of us.
I mean, yeah, I think we've pretty much covered it. We have some intact draft capital, but we need to free up some cap space. And again, I think for me, it's a little top heavy at running back, and I would trade 1 or 2 tight ends off of this squad too.
Is it for a tight end premium league? Ingram's a 1-year rental. Like, honestly, Hawkinson's the one you want to move, but he might be the hardest to move right now because it's a 2-year deal, big cap hit next year. So like that would ideally be the guy you'd move, and that's part of how you free up money to get to potentially keep Amon-Ra or Burrow. Maybe that's one where if Hawkinson returns this year and he does well, like you've got to be patient with it. Hopefully he returns before the trade deadline. That's not necessarily a given. But even so, I think the big thing is next year. So even if you don't trade him this year, I think trading Hawkinson next year before the auction, when if he returns and he looks well enough, next year the enthusiasm with JJ coming back, that might be like the increase in value. If you can sell him now, great. But I'm skeptical to think he'll really be strongly valued right now, because I know in just like a straight up dynasty league, I've been trying to sell him, and people really want that injury discount. They're not paying good price for him. In this league where it's just a 2-year contract with a big cap hit, there's probably less incentive for people to want to roster him. At least in a big dynasty league, someone can say, okay, I'll buy low now, I'll hold him till the big dip. But this is, man, I'm holding him with a big cap hit. So I could see where it's tougher to move Hawkinson in this than it would be in a normal dynasty league. But maybe next year it's easier. And that's how you help save money going into next year's auction.
Yeah, Trenton in the chat said he tried to get a tight end and he was told no. So maybe
so the other thing too is the football team might want to build through multiple tight ends like this. But yeah, I'd see, because trading McBride on a rookie deal will be great. Like if you could, like you don't have to spend on the money you're spending on Hawkinson. If even if you're able to sell him this year and just go with McBride and Ingram. Ingram for 1 year, he expires as a free agent, then you just kind of build around McBride. You don't need much else at tight end if what you're saving at the position helps you at the other positions.
So Trenton is the commissioner here. Maybe this is his angle all along. He's trying to get that tight end. So he wanted us to do the POP and convince this guy to give him a tight end. So
make sure that Kyle's guy's on. He hates tight ends. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's get to team number 2. Number two team, and this one's probably contract related because me and Brian both had this team at number 1. Kyle has them at number 6. They check in at 2 overall. It is the Road Warriors. Brian, you have this squad here.
Number 2. I also, first of all, shout out the name. I don't know where it's coming from for you, but I get flashbacks to the pro wrestling from when I was a kid. Animal and Hawk, the Road Warriors.
Yes.
Walking into Black Sabbath's Iron Man. That's with the shoulder pads with the spikes. Oh man. All right, so I guess I'll start at the end, and I think that connects to Kyle having them lower. So you're thin on cap space, and you have a first and 2/3, but no second round pick. But I think you're well positioned to address those issues because you arguably have the best overall roster in the league, and that I think is probably going to weigh heavier for someone like me coming at it, where I'm less in the weeds with the contract. So your quarterback room is solid. We've got Trevor, Purdy, and Darnold. Now, listen, Darnold is what he is. He probably will be a little more adequate than people think in a KOC offense that kind of can highlight some of those skills and put some guardrails on. I mean, they put together, chewing gum and duct tape with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins and stuff last year. Throw in Jaron Hall, right? And so I trust the coach there, and he's your quarterback 3 to begin with. Purdy, probably a capped ceiling, but again, an efficient quarterback that I'm fine with him as my 2. I happen to have more faith in T-Law than some other folks do. I won't get into the whole explanation on that. We've kind of already been here for 90 minutes, but if someone looks at this and says there's no stud, like Trevor Lawrence could easily be a stud. He could easily be a top 5, dynasty quarterback at the end of this season. When I look at your running backs, they're solid overall. We've got a good ratio going. Some guys I like to target, like Jalen Wright and Marshawn Lloyd and Ty Chandler, who I'm huge on, Jerome Ford.
I was going to say, all those running backs were mentioned in the most recent episode of
like 5. You're in my wheelhouse. Like I did it. We did an episode on Saturday for value running backs, and I think 1, 2, 3 of those were in my 5, and the others, Lloyd and Ford, were in the honorable mentions, right? So I love that. You're maybe a teensy bit top heavy though if you're looking at Brees, Jacobs, and Najee as your top three. So I'm moving off one of those, preferably Jacobs for age. And Najee, if you're going to move him, I might wait a little bit because Arthur Smith offense is going to feed the running backs. He might surprise some people. He's actually, he's not very efficient and he's not sexy, but if you look at the numbers, he's been solid when it comes to like what you're getting in the box score for fantasy points. So see how that offense is going to work. And, unless it's a disaster, I don't think his value is going to be any lower than it is right now. So certainly Jacobs or Najee would be one that I'd trade, and I'd shift that value storage elsewhere. Hopefully cap space and picks, and then just add like some depth pieces. You have a very elite top three wide receivers. I think if I look at my rankings, all three of them I think are in my dynasty top five, and that's Jefferson, Garrett Wilson, and AJ Brown. So well done. And wide receiver is the most important position we build around. You got three studs. Well done. DK and Flowers are not a bad 4 and 5. And Leggett, listen, man, he's athletic. They're going to get him the ball, even if he's not a great route runner. We'll see how that works out. I was probably wrong to be as high as I was on Roman Wilson, but you could do worse for a wide receiver 7, right? Very solid with the tight ends here. Andrews, I love Musgrave probably more than some others do, but again, who's going to eat in that room? And then we have in that offense a lot of pass catchers. And Eric All, I think, is a very good upside dice roll as far as a rookie tight end goes. Draft stock suppressed by injuries and stuff, but when on the field really did shine. So, a really good roster overall. I just think you have to tear down from a high ticket asset or two, move some stuff around, and address that thin cap space and that lack of draft capital. I love this team.
Yeah, so Kyle, tell us why we're wrong, because me and Brian both had him at number 1, and I had this one pretty clearly at number 1, but you had him at 6. So why are we wrong about this team?
So I will say, typically with PLPs, the top and bottom teams are the easiest to identify. That's what they quickly get to. It's the middle that I find it's really tough to rank. I don't think I've ever had in this is what, year 3 of PLPs, Jeff?
Year 5, believe it or not.
Oh.
Remember, we used to do them only on audio back
true,
when Jay
3 years live streams. That's right.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay, so in those 5 years, I don't think I've ever had a harder time ranking the number 1 team. And there were multiple options. Like this team might have even been considered there. I think I identified what I thought were the bottom 4 pretty easily, and then the rest was I don't even know who I'm putting number 1. So I think at one point I might have even considered this team, but really it's Jefferson and Lawrence. 1 year left each, right? So it's as much as we view them as good dynasty assets, they're essentially rental players right now. Jefferson on his 5th-year option, and Trevor Lawrence the final year of a rookie contract, and based on what is in the spreadsheets, it doesn't look like they picked up the 5th-year option. So they're both leaving as free agents. It really just leaves Brock Purdy and on an expiring contract in that quarterback room. Because I'm skeptical to think Darnold's starting next year. Now it's cheap, but it's also 4 years of Darnold, which is it's so cheap that it probably doesn't matter. If you're gonna give a quarterback, this is still 8.5 per year average. It's still a little bit. So I don't love the Darnold contract. I don't love what they have at quarterback. I feel like it's almost like that team with Stafford and Cousins, but a little better because I have a bit more faith in Purdy. But it's still just 2 years of Purdy. So a bit of weakness there. And then, losing Jefferson sucks. But this also is, as Brian said, a really deep top-end wide receiver room. And that's where I think the big question lies is what to do with the 5th-year option. So the last time we'll mention it. But this team has 2, and 2 Jets players, too. So Brian, his former Jets allegiance, maybe we'll start with you there. Who are you picking up the 5th-year option on? And again, you'll have the benefit to wait for this season to play out. But between Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, who's the player that the Road Warriors should pick up the 5th-year option?
It's Garrett Wilson. It's just simply elite wide receiver, lasts longer than elite running back. So yeah, give me Garrett Wilson.
Based on all things equal, like I don't know the rest of the roster. I'm probably doing that because I have the faith we have in Garrett Wilson. But looking at their team, knowing they'll have A.J. Brown, Metcalf, and Flowers, look at their running back room, and it's Josh Jacobs and Jerome Ford next year, and then the rookies Marshawn Lloyd and Bucky Irving. Feels like they need Breece Hall more than they need Garrett Wilson. So I'm actually leaning to pick up the running back, knowing that I'm not making necessarily a long-term commitment. I'm just you're having to do it a full season before the fact, but it's still just I'm picking up Breece Hall. If he looks great this year, do you think he'll stay great for 2 more years? If you think so, I think that's the pick. If you think he's going to fall off in the next 2 years, though, then Wilson's going to be safer to the production he'll give you for that 2026 season.
If he's going to, if they're going to lose Jefferson this year, because already 5th-year option, no extensions as far as the rules go, that suppresses his trade value.
Jefferson's trade value, sure, because you'd be like you'd have to trade him
because any team is only getting him for this year and has to try to buy him back in the. That's an interesting wrinkle, right?
Based on Road Warriors team, I imagine he's just riding him out. Like let's go for the championship this year. Like what you're getting as a trade for Jefferson probably isn't worth it. Like you're probably just better off just keeping him on the team, I'd imagine. So I didn't really think about trading Jefferson. You just you picked up the 5th-year option to have this year with him, and then you try and win him in the auction next year. And then again, do you want to spend money that way? Do you want to spend it on a quarterback? I guess if you pick up a 5th-year option on Wilson or Hall, that wouldn't kick in next year. It would kick in for 2026. So that wouldn't be a big deal. I guess the one thing that helps is Mark Andrews is just on a 1-year contract. So you'll save cap space off that. Like, you choose not to spend it on Andrews. And if they're thinking like you, Brian, like you were saying, you like Luke Musgrave, maybe this is a team that decides, okay, I've got Andrews this year, but then starting next year, I'm building through these rookie contract quarterbacks at tight end. Sorry, these rookie tight end contracts with Musgrave and Eric All. And like, instead of spending big on Andrews, that's what I'm going to do to try and win back Jefferson or get a quarterback upgrade. So you definitely see the path where things line up. Like some of the trade ideas you were talking about there, Brian, like Najee Harris, the final year of his rookie contract. It's a little bit of, okay, with Rachaad White, do you sell him to a contender that, okay, I want to just buy a cheap running back for 1 year? Najee Harris kind of fits to that same mold as Rachaad White does. Only, I guess, with Rachaad White, you would have this year and next year. So White's probably a little more valuable because it's not just buying him for 1 season. But yeah, Najee, actually, with Jaylen Warren out, you let Najee have a productive game or two without Warren, and do you sell him off like after week 1, like just bank on him having a good week 1 and sell him off that? And then once Warren's there, if he ever gets a path to a lot of touches, then you sell him because both are on expiring contracts. So if you're not necessarily playing them in your lineup, if you're playing Jerome Ford a lot because Chubb's out, like the Steelers both having the handcuff, you might want to just trade both off, even if it's the same team or different teams. But yeah, I like the idea of trading Josh Jacobs. Someone might view that as it's not just a rental. They'll buy Josh Jacobs for this year and next year. So I like both of those moves, either selling Jacobs or Najee, maybe even both. So it's a good point by Brian when talking about that.
Yeah, and you didn't ask me who I would fifth.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. So who would your answer be for the 5th year?
So I was going to go Breece Hall because it is a 5th year. It's 1 year, right? So running backs fall off that proverbial cliff at that point. So you buy them for the 1 year, just like NFL teams do, and then you just let them go because they're not as valuable after that point. So that's who I would go with. Would be Breece Hall. Like I think in regular dynasty, I'm thinking long term. I'm thinking I'll keep Garrett Wilson, but you're only gonna get him for that 1 year. So I prefer the high end running back at that point.
I guess the tricky thing with Hall would be if he doesn't have an extension in place. The Jets, they don't have the 5th year option, so they would have to let him walk. So are you worried him going somewhere else? Or, okay, if it's a better offense, does that actually help Breece Hall? But if it's a team that maybe doesn't throw him as many passes because they don't need to. So it's complicated. Luckily, again, the decision doesn't have to necessarily be made right now. So you still have about maybe 11 months before actually having to decide this. So at least there's an advantage there. But it feels like they're too good of players that this is an instance, unlike the last team with London and Walker. Like with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, like it feels like you really do want to pick up one of them. It's just they find a way to keep an elite player even if it's just for 1 extra year.
Yep, agreed. All right, let's get to team number 1.
Number one.
The number one team in this league is Chalupa Batman, and I believe this is the commissioner's team who's been in the chat all night. Typically, this tends to happen often, but the commissioner gets the number one spot here. And Kyle, this is your squad.
It's funny. I feel like it hasn't happened as much this year, but like I feel
You're
like
right.
it was it last year or 2 years ago. It just seemed like every single time it was whoever submitted the league was number one. So maybe we've done a better job with that. But I mean, it was the first team in the spreadsheet, and when like I kept just coming back to it, and the idea of having Jalen Hurts on a 4-year contract, and then Anthony Richardson still with 3 years left on a rookie deal, plus the potential of a 5th-year option. That's a really nice QB duo that you have for long term. So right off the bat, it's probably is my favorite quarterback group. There was a team that I think had Kyler, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix, and that's like 3 long-term guys as well. But I'll take Jalen Hurts. Like, give me that guy that has that QB1 overall potential. And it's an expensive contract. It's even more expensive than we're talking about with Lamar Jackson. So it was like just signed this year, so they paid up for it. So I've been telling people to go trade for Jalen Hurts in Dynasty because it feels like there's been a dip in his value. Not the case in this auction this year. Like, you paid top dollar for him, but I think it's worth it. Like, they still had enough cap space to fit a solid team around. I love CMC and Achane. With my touchdown projection series I did with the Full Press Fantasy Pod, I talked about, I think these are the 2 guys with the most touchdown upside at the running back position. So I know it's 3 years of CMC. That's a little scary. I just did an RSO startup where I gave CMC 3 years to, if it was 2 years, it would have been a higher cap hit per year. So to stretch out the money, you'll maybe give that extra year. You hate doing it on a Kyron or a Kamara. I think you can stomach it on CMC. It is risky though. Like, you realize that 3 years on a 28-year-old running back, but he's not most running backs either. So it's a risk reward with that contract. And then like the team with Marvin Harrison on a rookie deal, I love Malik Neighbors and what his potential is. So give me that on a rookie contract long term. And then 2 years of Tyreek Hill. And I have Hill as the wide receiver 1 in my redraft rankings this year. So there's a chance they have the QB1, RB1, and wide receiver 1 this year. Tight end is the position where they have depth, but they might not even have a really solid tight end too. Gesicki, Tyler Conklin, Isaiah Likely, varying degrees of contracts there. And then minimum contracts with Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. With only 4 running backs, I think the first thing I would do is maybe cut both Henry and Jonnu. I know they're both should be productive players this year, so it's not people you would normally just cut. But I think Gesicki will do fine this year with the Bengals. I kind of view him as the tight end 1, and I think the rookies will come on slow, and I don't think that Tanner Hudson really stands in his way. Like him tied to Joe Burrow. So I'm fine with the Gesicki Conklin sort of combo as like your tight end 1 and 2. And if Andrews ever gets hurt, Likely is that guy.
Let me just chime in there real quick while we're talking about the tight end. Ryan, my co-host on the Wednesday show, thinks that Isaiah Likely could be the 3rd target on that offense. He thinks they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, and they're going to find ways to put Andrews and Likely on the field at the same time. Of course, he's a Ravens fan, so he would say that. But I've been holding on to Likely for that likely possibility.
Love it, Jeff. But to be honest, you look at what they have at receiver, like Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Bateman, like, are they really – those are the guys that roadblock this scenario from happening. Like, I don't really buy that. So if like they want to make Likely that option, I think they have the capacity to make it happen without it like hurting their team. If they feel like getting 2 tight ends is the best way to get as many of our best players on as possible, then I think that makes sense. But all to say, as much as I think, like, I've got Henry, I think ranked higher than all of them in redraft this year. But if it means you cut him and you don't have any dead cap, I think it's worth it to go get some extra running backs. You have, 5 tight ends, 4 running backs. You cut 2 tight ends, you're down to 3, and then you're at 6 running backs. You're doubling your running back to tight end room. I think Brian and I both like that ratio a lot more. So that's just like 2 real easy things that you can do without adding any cap. This team, like, $2 million cap space. So they have a little bit to play with, but not a ton like some other teams would. So you might be really conscious of that and not just cut Gesicki or Conklin on future contracts. You'd rather cut the 1-year guys like Henry and Johnny. So if you could do that, add a couple of running backs to the depth, I think that gets like the roster construction the exact way. But like I said, it was really tough for me to rank a number 1 team because every team had a little flaw. And I guess this one would be the tight end room would be the flaw here, but I think that's enough for me to work around. I love what you get with those 2 quarterback contracts. I love the mix of veterans, productive guys, and rookies at wide receiver. And then, the CMC Achane combo. Maybe I've got too big of eyes for that duo at running back, but like I don't think it's out of the question. That's the RB1 and RB2 in fantasy. Certainly more likely for CMC to do that. But I have Achane as RB5 in redraft, so that also might just be I tend to be higher than consensus on Achane, so maybe that's also informing why this pick is here. But to be fair, all of us did rank this in the top 3, so this felt like after like the last 4 or 5 teams with the big disparities, we finally got back to I think we mostly see this team the same.
Yeah, I was just going to pass it to Brian and say just that this is a team that we all kind of agreed on, from an overall regular dynasty standpoint. And of course, you had them at number 1 for the contract league side of things. Brian, anything you wanted to add to this team and why you like this build?
So the 2 things I would add that's maybe explain why I have them 3, which is the lowest among us. Sorry to focus on the negative. We don't really have a top tight end here. It's a very spray and pray, and even among the spray and prays, a couple guys I wouldn't even spray. And I think your running back group is just fragile. It's top heavy and small. If CMC or Achane goes down, what are we doing? Where's the right? So I would want to shift my ratio a lot on this squad, but obviously some very good pieces, and that's why it's still in the top 30.
Yep. I agree 100%. That is what I looked at as well. That how shallow, top heavy, but shallow that running back room is, and
you even say with the quarterbacks, right? Like Joe Flacco's the 3rd QB, so if Richardson or Hurts get hurt, that also hurts that team. So 3rd quarterback and then extra running back depth are probably the 2 priorities for this team. If you've chose to build this way at tight end, I think it makes sense because you're spending so little money on it. Now, the fact that you have 5 hurts that a little bit. So again, that's why I like cutting 2. You're spending so little at tight end that you pick the matchup every week, and you say, if I can be super strong at every other position, that's the one position I can afford to be weak at. But again, what that requires is extra security, both at quarterback and running back. So that's kind of the 2 things that team needs to do. But unlike, say, some other teams where we're saying, okay, they need to upgrade for a starter, and you could, in theory, do that here at tight end, it feels like it's easier to get depth at positions than it is to get those big starters. So,
fair point. All right, fellas, that wraps up the podcast. I want to thank the both of you for spending about 2 hours with me on this. We really love doing these POPs, and everybody in the chat that's been super active. Really appreciate y'all tuning in as well. We hope that you enjoyed the show, and I know you've purchased, I think now at least 2 years, if not 3 years in a row. So hopefully we'll see you again next year. So thank you for tuning in tonight. We'll go around the room real quick, gentlemen. Give us your Twitter handle, anything that you want to plug for the season upcoming. We'll go to you first, Kyle.
I was gonna say, I remember I think 2 years ago, this being the 3rd year, we were talking about okay, do you pick up Metcalf's 5th year option and David Montgomery's 5th? I feel like they either happened or we were talking about them happening in the future. So great to see this league come back every year again. I love the format. It's my favorite way to play fantasy. So the fact that kind of got a little spoiled here in the month of August, got back-to-back weeks of RSO PLP. So I'm super happy. Jeff's keeping me content, and I guess Brian was happy for a Senra marathon. We almost got to 2 hours. Maybe I stretch out this outro an extra 7 minutes and we actually hit the 2 hour mark. So I'll talk about all my shows. That'll probably do it right there. But Sunday mornings and Monday night pregame shows. So Sundays, I think we'll be starting around 11:30. Mondays at 7. So co-host both of those on the Going42 Live Network. So be sure to subscribe here, folks. You can like the videos as well. Tons of content as well. Still shows happening before we get to the season, but certainly in season, there is a show every day of the week. So around the clock content at Going42 Live. I contribute to a couple other sites, full press coverage, the FF league winners, or I guess it's not FF anymore, just the league winners now, and Fantasy Six Pack. So those other 3 sites, I do a combination of writing, podcasting, live streaming with all 3.
Good stuff. Brian.
You can catch me live streaming on Twitch wearing cat ears and eating sesame noodles. I'm on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. right here on this YouTube channel, Saturday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, live Dynasty show called Dynasty Saturday Night 5, lists of 5 with Josh Walker. Tune in there. And then midweek audio only long form Dynasty podcast called Dynasty Fever at Dynasty Fever Pod on Twitter.
Good stuff, gentlemen. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Jeff Lambert77. I do want to plug the Discord. You could find that in my Twitter handle and my Twitter bio, or if you go to GoingFor2.com. The Discord is completely free. It's pretty active. We got some what we call fantasy coaches in there. Essentially, we give them a role. You could tag when you ask a question, a sit-start question, waiver wire question, whatever the case may be. You tag fantasy coaches, and the idea is that someone will be available to answer your question, and that is completely free. We got a couple of cool things planned for the season that we're going to be doing in the Discord exclusively. So make sure you do Discord, join that for sure. It's some great content in there. And that wraps it up, fellas. This is the second to last PLP. We got one more to do this season. We'll do it, I think, next week. But for Kyle, for Brian, I'm Jeff. And to all the league mates, we hope to see y'all next year.